A good story will have the main plot, but also a good story always has a subplot, or sometimes several subplots. The subplot is a point of the story that runs throughout the story. It's not the main point of the story, but every now and then the story will break to the subplot and it will provide another story in the background. In the book of Daniel, the main story is on Daniel, but the subplot of the first 4 chapters of Daniel, one of them is the life of Nebuchadnezzar and how God was trying to reach this wicked man. If you had gone to every Jewish home in the 5th century or 6th century BC, the name Nebuchadnezzar would have been synonymous with destroying Jerusalem, destroying the temple of God, and they would not have spoke of his name favorably, and yet I believe he's going to be in heaven. Because God was working on the life of Nebuchadnezzar, even in the wicked state that he was. And we see it through the first 4 chapters of Daniel. In Daniel chapter 1, Nebuchadnezzar sees Daniel and his 3 friends, who are 10 times wiser than anyone else in the city of Babylon. He sees 4 men who trust in God, and he has never ever in his life been confronted with the evidence of a God superior than the God he believes in. The first step in Nebuchadnezzar's conversion is in Daniel chapter 1, where he is confronted by God. And us in our lives as well as young people, God confronts us with his existence. It could be some circumstance that changes miraculously. It could be reading his word, but God will confront us in some way with the reality of his existence. He takes us to the next stage in Daniel chapter 2. The main story is about Daniel, but we see Nebuchadnezzar interacting with Daniel, and at the end of the chapter, we see what he says about God. At the end of the chapter, he says, your God is a God of God. Your God is a King of Kings, because he revealed a dream. Daniel saw the dream, Nebuchadnezzar saw the same dream, and it was something supernatural. And Nebuchadnezzar, at the end of the chapter, he is speaking like a man convinced that God is God. He's a Lord of Kings. So chapter 1, he's confronted. In chapter 2, he's convinced, but he still has not yet given his heart. So in Daniel chapter 3, God says, okay, I'll turn up the pressure. In Daniel chapter 3, what does God do? The story, the burning fiery furnace. We get 3 Hebrew boys that stand for right, and there's many lessons there, but they stand for right and will not compromise. And at the end of the chapter, they're thrown into the fiery furnace. God chooses to deliver them, and they do not burn. They come out of the fire completely unscathed by the fire. And Nebuchadnezzar says at the end of chapter 3, there is no other God who can deliver like this. What we see is God is, in a sense, turning up the pressure on Nebuchadnezzar. He goes from being confronted in chapter 1, convinced in chapter 2, and by the end of Daniel chapter 3, you could maybe say that Nebuchadnezzar is convicted. Convicted that there is a God more powerful than him. Convicted that there is a God above him. But conviction is not enough. I'm sitting on a log here, and there's a phrase I once heard that said, there's 3 frogs sitting on a log. One decides to jump. How many are left? And you ask that to any audience, and oftentimes people will say 2. But the answer is 3. There's 3 frogs on a log. One decides to jump, but he only decides. He does not actually jump. Being convicted on something is not enough. There may be something God is convicting you on right now. It may be a relationship. It may be a certain lifestyle practice. It may be somewhere you're going. It may be a company you're hanging around. It may be something you're doing. It may be your life calling. It may be your career. But God may be convicting you on something. He may be calling you to ministry. But conviction, or even deciding to do what's right, is not enough. You've actually got to get off the log, jump off, and then action with the decision. It's not until Daniel chapter 4 that Nebuchadnezzar finally, through the course of events in chapter 4, experiences a conversion where he realizes there is no other God. God will do according to his will. And in Daniel chapter 4, we finally see the conversion of Nebuchadnezzar. The 4 steps he goes through. He's confronted by God. He's convinced about God. He's convicted about God. And then he's finally converted. My question for you is, which stage are you at in your whole life? Or which stage are you at in a particular area of your life? Maybe you're convinced about something, but maybe not yet convicted. Maybe you're convicted, but your conviction is not enough. You need to go to the next level, the next stage, and be fully converted on whatever it is that God is talking to you about. So I'd like to encourage you this week to take some time to reflect, to see where you are in your whole life, and that we won't stop at level 1, 2, 3, but we won't be content until we stop at stage 4, which is full surrender to God and jumping off the log, not just thinking about it. God bless you.